The International Monetary Fund is warning Nigeria that the country is facing the risk of dollarization. In a report titled Digital Money and Central Banks Balance Sheets, the IMF says people tend to protect themselves by holding dollars under high and persistent inflation environments. Dealing with dollar scarcity and high inflation dollarization levels in Nigeria has become a concern. But the recent policy announcements of the redesign of the 200, the 500 and 1,000 Naira notes may also seem to be putting some pressure on the market. But that pales in comparison to the decreasing value of the Nigerian currency. As of today, the official Central Bank of Nigeria rate puts $1 to 438 Naira. But at the parallel or black market, the Naira is trading between 800 and 850 Naira to $1. Ubah Jeremiah Ifeanyi is a senior financial analyst at Nairametrics, and he joins me now to look at this. Ubah, welcome to the show. When we look at this conversation around dollarization, what exactly is the IMF warning Nigeria about? What is dollarization of the economy?
Well, basically, when citizens of the economy prefer to use a foreign currency, particularly dollar, rather than their local currency, which is naira. We are seeing this happening in different parts of the world, and with the increased depreciation of the naira, it shows the preference of Nigerian citizens for the US dollar as against to the naira. So that's essentially what dollarization means. When the citizens are looking at it as this would be a better off transaction to collect my goods in dollars, to buy in dollar, and dollar now becomes more preferred than the local currency because the local currency is fast depreciating.
Okay, so when you put it like that, it doesn't seem we're fully where the World Bank, the IMF might be warning about, but some would say there's been some level of dollarization of the Nigerian economy for some time now. So what makes what the IMF is warning about a bit different from the kind of situations or challenges Nigeria has seen? Because we're such an import-dependent country, we're very, very vulnerable to the effects that the dollar has both locally and internationally.
Okay, so what I am essentially saying is talking about the increased risk of dollarization, meaning that, okay, once we have seen some exchange rate depreciation, once the citizens have gotten some appetite for foreign currency, it's probably hard to reverse it and how to swing citizens back to believing in local currency. Usually, we see sources of demand and supply determining the rates or the movements of prices in the market. And although demand and supply could be pushed by rational activities like exports and imports, consumer sentiment or individual sentiment still plays a big role. Take, for instance, somebody that had $1,000 as of last year. That's just 500 naira. Right now, if he said $1,000, he will get close to 850,000. So that's more fun than investing in a stock. I probably different. So it gives the whole mentality. Let me hold it a little more. Let me buy more dollars. And as long as the demand continues to increase, that type would become more or less a capital individuals living in that organization.
So this risk that the IMF is warning Nigeria about, the increased risk for the potential for dollarization of Nigeria's economy, the largest on the continent, do you think that risk has increased, has gotten worse since the Central Bank of Nigeria announced that it would be redesigning some Naira notes? There's been so much conversation around that in the past few days.
There's an obvious linkage between the central bank announcement on the redesign of the Naira and the uptake of dollar prices in the black market. So what we need to understand is that we have 85% of the money circulation outside the bank. It's over 2 trillion, 2.3 trillion outside the banking sector. And what that means is that if that money doesn't find a way of getting into the banking system or looking for a way to transfer liquidity to another currency, that money becomes worthless. So individuals that have vast amounts of naira that are sitting idle will not have to be faced with the decision: would I go to the bank and deposit my naira and probably crash, or I look for alternatives and buy foreign currency like pound and US dollar? So this is the rationale behind it. Although the central bank's intention was to try and push money back into the bank. But the truth about it is that our policymakers need to stop this adult way of looking at policy of the economy, because the economy is dynamic. Policies are interactive with economic agents. You can make a policy, but you expect a possible reaction from economic agents, and that's what happened. The market reacted. They are reacting in a way that preserves your self-interest, which is to be expected, to be honest. So yes, there's an obvious delay, because this done mistakes. This particularly done very close to the election, and there are so many factors involved. So yes, there's an obvious mistake.
So in line with this, following up on this conversation around redesigning the Naira, we've seen Nigeria's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission swoop in on some bureau de change operators. We've also been hearing reports of people even turning in 20-year-old mint notes. They've kept money, currency in their homes or wherever for the longest time. Now, those who support the policy believe that the short-term pains will eventually be outweighed by the long-term gains. What do you really think? What fillers is Nairametrics getting from the markets in relation to what this redesign is doing to the value?
Well, it's really hard to know whether the short-term or the long-term trade-off will pay more than short-term loss, because we haven't understood the impact. We don't know how much the Naira is going to fall to. It's just a prediction. It is close to the 1,000 region and even push slightly above it. Now, if you're looking at economic theory, we understand that prices and wages are sticky upwards, are flexible upwards and sticky downwards. What that means is that once the prices go up, it's going to be a miracle for it to come down. But trying to see the impact of never pushing above the 1,000 Naira to $1, we are going to have the effect like multiply across different sectors. Even in the labor sector, we have individuals that we evaluate their employment and say, how much am I earning? Let's convert it to dollars, right? So it's going to affect a broad spectrum. And to say the long-run effect with a wage short-run effect, I've not seen any data to bear it, because we have not seen any improvement in our fundamentals. We have not seen any improvement in securing the oil we get. We have not seen any improvement in exports. We are seeing continuous imports, because now more Naira are taking dollars for imports. We need to get the latest iPhone. We need to get the latest designer. So what happens is that I will see more and more pressure, both from sentiment and actually demand, because they're moving into the December period of high demand. You know, most of our Christmas gifts and new gadgets are transactions we do in dollars. So this is going to activate the price. For it to pay off the long run, it still needs to be seen, and there still needs to be a harmony between not only the physical policy. So yes, the EFCC is right to do their job and try and curtail illicit first. Because I said, it's good that they are trying to stop this movement, but if I had a cash that has been sitting in my house for 20 years, I wouldn't want to put it in the bank either. I would like to push it through other means, and that's why you can see it. You see adding pressure to the dollar, to the foreign currency, and causing chaos for the average Nigerian.
Okay. Ubah, we're going to take a quick time out. When we come back, let's look at the attempts. You've mentioned, of course, some of the fundamentals and the foundationals that are having issues. But what are the attempts being made and why they have seemingly not paid out when it comes to this Naira-dollar imbalance? And then there are calls now at this point in time that the CBN should simply abolish the dual rate or abolish the official rate and let the market decide. But many are worried that the Naira could hit 1,000 Naira to a US dollar in the coming weeks. We'll pick up the thread of the conversation right after this. My guest is Ubah Jeremiah Ifeanyi, Senior Financial Analyst at Nairametrics, as we look at the IMF warning Nigeria of the risk of dollarization of the country's economy. Now, Ubah, there have been several attempts to address the Naira-dollar imbalance, and with Nigeria being such an import-dependent country, there's no way you can do away without need for the dollar. So in terms of why those policies and why those attempts have failed, what's the reason behind them? You mentioned foundationals before we went on a break. Why have some of these attempts failed to really right the imbalance to at least a reasonable extent?
So, like I said before, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, yes. So, like I said before, these fundamental indicators of exchange rate remain like your import and your export, right? So that's the fundamental indicator of exchange rate. And when we see appreciating exchange rate, it's usually supposed to be an indication that our imports, we are more import dependent than we are exporting. We are not producing ourselves for export. This is better. So for us to be able to show up export, it means we have to make homegrown products to boost production, boost the supply chain process, boost the transportation and every other bottleneck that takes a product from a raw material to finished goods, smoothing the process and make it more efficient for us to not only feed ourselves but export. This is the way. This is the proving and something to actually regain your exchange rate back to where it is. But like I said, in this day and age, we have so many other market factors like pushing the exchange rate. Like acting like sentiment, the horse mentality. We have people that have essentially lost faith in the Naira, and I have people that is safe in US dollar. Because by the time you are safe in Naira, you check your account balance and you check the rate of the Naira, you do the conversion, you start crying because you know that the Naira is depreciating faster than you can anticipate or faster than you can see. So this is the situation, this is the fundamentals that we need to address.
So even as today stands right now, there are even more calls for the CBN to abolish the official rates and let the Naira float in order to unify both the official and the black market rates. Some analysts are expecting that the Naira could hit 1,000 Naira to a dollar in the coming weeks. As I said earlier, it's somewhere around 800 to 850 Naira right now. What do you think is going to happen? How likely is it that the Naira will hit 1,000 to the dollar, and also even the potential of having the CBN free float the Naira, or at least float the Naira to really find the market value?
Well, so I really can't anticipate how fast the Naira is going to hit 1,000. But if this pressure continues, we can see it faster than we expect, because we see that we have less than 100 days. So I would like to know what's going to happen after the 100 days. We want to make happen to the pressure of the market. This is when I'll be able to make sufficient prediction. Because right now, we are experiencing what we call an FX shock because of this particular policy. Now, I've always had the opinion that intervening, the CBN intervention in the FX market is primarily supposed to be a short-term process. That is supposed to be done within a short period of time. Now, it's like riding a bull. The CBN trying to intervene in the FX market, it's like riding a bull. Eventually, that bull has to knock you off if you have not been able to stabilize it enough. And even if you have, it's just a limited time. But CBN has been writing this book for far too long. That's why we see that the disparity between the fixed exchange rate and the parallel exchange rate continues to widen exponentially. So, floating it, the CBN has been advocating against floating it. His intention as far as conversation from the beginning of the year was that he would be able to stabilize error or easily decide to stop intervening in the IIT window. But as we approach December, we can see that this is no longer the reality. Rather than floating the Naira, the CBN might choose to devalue the currency, which means reduce the value for the official window, that's the IIT window. So instead of us seeing IIT windows trading at 400, you can see looking around the 500 billion or 600 billion. In fact, the Bank of England has projected that there will be possible devaluation by next year to 520. But he also hinted that no such policy will happen prior to the election. It's very unlikely that we see a reaction to this massive pull of the current market until the elections are over in February. So this is the state of play. For a devaluation, we have seen the CBN hedge funds saying we don't face Naira because the impact of the citizenry is more costly than the depreciating Naira. For them to place the money, not giving the average citizens an option to access dollar at the official rate. Although the availability of that dollar and the rationing of that dollar to the citizens has still been questioned we don't have this pressure continues. The 100-day marker will definitely put sufficient pressure on the Naira for us to see its breaking point. But before you need to start pulling back as market starts bringing some sanity. And
all right, Ubah, I'm going to have to cut you off there. Unfortunately, your line is getting quite bad and we are struggling to hear you. But my guest there, Ubah Jeremiah Ifeanyi, a senior financial analyst with Nairametrics, as we get into the conversation around the IMF warning Nigeria of the increased risk of dollarization of the economy. This, of course, comes after this weekend, or the weekend we have come into in this week, the Naira hit one of its lowest levels on record. Currently, the Naira on the black market is anywhere between 800 to 850 Naira to $1. The official rate at the CBN is $1 to 438 Naira. Many have called for the unification of these rates, with the CBN floating the Naira, but the potential and possibility of that seem a little bit far off. And of course, the announcement of the redesign of the 200, the 500 and the 1,000 Naira notes has also gotten a reaction from the markets. We're going into another weekend now, getting closer into the festive season for Africa's largest economy. Many will be worried to see what the weekend could bring for the Naira. You're watching Business Edge. When we come back, we get into international business news. And days after Elon Musk signed on the dotted line, his new company, Twitter, is the subject of a class action lawsuit. The details coming up. Twitter is now the subject of a class action lawsuit filed in a San Francisco federal court over announced plans to lay off some 3,700 staff. Twitter employees say the company is eliminating workers without enough notice in violation of federal and California state law. The news of the lawsuit comes after the company said it would inform staff today about whether or not they will be laid off following the firm's takeover by Elon Musk. In an internal email, the social media company said the cuts are an effort to place Twitter on a healthy path. The firm added that its offices would be temporarily closed and badge access would be suspended in order to help ensure the safety of each employee as well as Twitter's systems and customer data. The Eurozone will soon reveal changes to its fiscal rules, a move that could have significant repercussions for government borrowing costs and the region's bond markets. The European Commission, the executive arm of the EU, will next week present a proposal to reform the fiscal rules that have been in place for almost 30 years. The rulebook has been criticized for being too opaque, for being too hard to implement, and for not being well enforced. Fiscal discrepancies among Eurozone member states have always been a contentious topic and have sparked division among the members. Europe's top environmental, social, and governance fund class may be close to a tipping point. Known as Article 9, industry estimates show that the designation may be stripped from hundreds of funds in the coming months. There are now signs that investment clients are starting to retreat as fresh data points to a marked slowdown in flows. A report indicates that some Article 9 funds hold assets that may violate UN and OECD standards on everything from bribery to environmental damage. This development exposes gaps in an ESG regulatory framework once hailed as the world's most ambitious. The head of Germany's network regulator has warned that the country's gas storage facilities could be quickly emptied if this winter gets really cold. Klaus Müller said a few freezing cold days are signaling an increase in gas consumption. Müller's jurisdiction would be in charge of gas rationing if it came to that, a scenario that Germany wants to avoid at all costs via regular pleas to cut consumption by at least 20%. As of November 2nd, Germany's gas storage levels stood at 99.3%. Müller believes Europe's top economy could keep going for around 9 to 10 weeks if it is solely to rely on those tanks, provided that it would be a mild winter. Most Asian markets rose on Friday after the previous day's Federal Reserve-induced sell-off, with Hong Kong leading the way with another big rally fueled by hopes that China will roll back some of its painful zero-COVID policies. Fed boss Jerome Powell's pushback against expectations of a softer approach to monetary tightening sent shivers through trading floors and ramped up fears of a global recession. The governor told a news conference that while the size of increases would likely come down, they would top out at a higher level than expected, dealing a blow to hopes they would end soon. The decision came as other central banks have signaled they will tone down their hawkishness, even in face of decades-high inflation. The success or failure of the United Nations flagship climate conference is likely to depend on getting wealthy countries to deliver on reparations, a highly divisive and emotive issue that is seen as a fundamental question of climate justice. Delegates are tense about this as COP27 climate summit starts in Egypt on November the 6th. The annual gathering of the UN Climate Change Conference will see more than 30,000 delegates convene in the Red Sea resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh to discuss collective action on the climate emergency. The conference comes amid growing calls for rich countries to compensate climate-vulnerable nations as it becomes harder for many people to live safely on a warming planet. They argue that the agreement on this issue is imperative as climate impacts become more severe. You're watching Business Edge. When we come back, a business rescue plan is putting some 400 million rand that's owed to South African cane growers at risk. What could this mean for the industry? The conversation after this.